Frag. Normally, when I write poetry, I like to sit down and write a poem, start to finish, in one sitting. Usually, I kind of get what gets me sitting down is I have something on my mind to write, and I get it out, and maybe afterwards I go back and revise it and polish it up. But I, for the most part, like to do poetry writing in one sitting. Sometimes, though, I start to write and I can't quite get to where I'm going with the poem, and I just keep writing and writing, and I pick away at it over the course of several days, and I call that a frag file when I save it. I have lots of frag files. This is my latest frag file. I've been drinking for 5 hours. I've also been sitting in the same room for 5 hours, with the occasional cigarette break out on the deck. I've been sitting here waiting for my neighbors to come out and party, but so far they have not come out. Instead, I hear a low, steady crunching and scraping tone. I think at first it is the air conditioner from the neighboring third-floor apartment, but it is not. It is a lawnmower going about its business at least 3 houses away. I cannot see it. I can only hear it. And just now, as the newest, freshest breeze is happening, I can smell the freshly cut grass of that property yonder that I cannot see. I smell the bloody grass blood come running to my window like a refugee in a foreign war. And now all goes dark. The scent is gone, but the sound of the grass cutter remains. Inaudible conversations from the windows of the nearest house tried to interject between my ear and the lawnmower, but they failed to make it a steady interjection. So I hear the cutting. I've since eaten. I ordered pizza and forgot to tip online, so when the pizza man came, I told him this and handed him a 20 and said, "Keep it." "You sure, man?" "Yeah, I'm sure. That was yesterday. Today is today. The woman downstairs is getting killed. I am sure of it. There's banging and screaming and banging all over, in every room, against every wall. I suppose I am supposed to call 911 right now, but I am not going to do it. I'm not even sure it's actually happening, so I'd be ratting myself out if I was wrong. My father had a workshop 200 feet from the main house. On the weekends, he would go out there into the shed and get lost there for hours and hours all by himself. He had woodworking machines. Sometimes he would do woodwork, cutting shapes and polishing them. Sometimes he would sell the woodwork that came out of this mood. Sometimes he would just read machine articles, or he would organize and reorganize his workshop, moving the tools into place and gathering all the miscellaneous nuts and bolts and electrical components into coffee tins. He never came out to take a piss. He would piss in empty beer bottles instead and keep them on the shelf, just as organized as all the tools in the background. He had a well-stocked bar of piss bottles. He was serving piss. He was the piss brewery. On the weekdays, when my father was at work, I would go into his workshop and smell the piss. It was strong. It was a message to stay out. It was a message that this was not a place for me to hang out in, but I hung out there anyway. I defied my father's territorial pissings, and I would play with all his tools and move them about and give him something to do on the next weekend. He must have known I was the culprit, but he never confronted me. I met a poet in my 20s who was my age and lived across the street from the Boston Common in a very tiny studio apartment. His mind was on fire at the time I met him. I could tell right away. I could feel his mind. When I entered his apartment, it felt like a high-pressure system of electrical energy. His mind was everywhere. He could not keep up with it. He was smoking marijuana and offered me some. I smoked with him, and then I really felt his mind. Good God, the kid was on fire. He read his poems to me, one after the other, without ever coming up for air. He was mostly a stream of conscious poet, and at the time I was a more disciplined poet, and so I couldn't feel it was a good match. I wasn't feeling his work, But he handed me a 50-page poem of his anyway and said I could take it home with me. I read a few pages and made some marks here and there. Believed I would someday come back to this poet friend and talk about his work to him. But then I stopped around page 10, stopped making marks. I got busy with something else in my life. I never saw that poet friend again. So I said, yes, I will go to your open mic. I want to have my head blown apart. I want to be obliterated by something raw and good. The staccato, the intonation, the inflection, the pitch. I want to be mesmerized while standing on my own 2 feet. I would not be sitting. I would be standing with my eyes closed as though I were about to be served the body of Christ. I want for that this time I am served the body I will be rewarded with a transportation into the state of heaven. That is why I have gone to your open mic. That is why I came. And that is precisely what happened. It is a good third Sunday of the month. And now that my mind has been blown apart, I want to say thank you. I had needed the help to get into orbit, do a spacewalk outside of my body. What's the point of that, you may wonder? Nothing. There is no point is the answer. It just feels good. Maybe better to witness life from this perspective while open and above my problems because I have rendered myself forgetful of them. Above the weight of my problems that would otherwise drag me down to be drowned. Above the weight is where I have ascended to, and it is where I presently hover. I remember the first time I saw a snake. I was in the front yard behind the workshop, near the pine trees and old horse fence. It was a small garter snake. It happened to accidentally come up on me. I got scared and screamed, so it coiled up. And this scared me even more, so I threw large boulders on top of it. And each time I struck it with a boulder, it stuttered while taking the blow, but did not back down from its coil. Boulder after boulder I pelted this thing, but it did not back down. Finally, I sickened of hurting it, so I left the battlefield and forfeited the contest. I cried to my father that night while I was laying down to sleep. I cried to him for what I had done, and I cried so much I cried myself to sleep. Oh, this is the wrong version. Damn, I must have taken the wrong version with me. Hold on a moment, hold on. I've got it right here. The right version. Here it is. I brought that one also with me. My brother used to poison himself in this room I am in. He'd inject heroin there. He nearly died 6 times in this room. My mother called 911 every time, and every time they came just in time with Narcan. But that was when my mother still had her wits about her. A couple years before the onset of her illness. Today, my brother visits my mother on the weekends at the assisted living. He brings her bottled water and toiletries. He checks her wardrobe and makes sure her bed is made. He looks for things that are out of place. He cleans her bathroom. He washes her feet and soaks them and trims her toenails. He jokes with her sometimes, telling or hearing the same joke several times, but he does so without ever tiring. He is grateful for his life, the one she saved so many times. He is grateful and is trying to pay her back, a down payment once a week, little by little, maybe, just maybe, making it up to her for the hell he put her through. He was grieving the loss of his daughter being a part of his life. That's what incited the addiction, being denied access to his child. It wasn't his fault, but he was meant to suffer the pain anyway. A pain that ran so deep in heart, in the core, a pain he needed help to live with. I was at Seagull Beach in South Yarmouth in late March. I was looking for stones to skip, but there were hardly few. My companion kept finding them for me while we walked. We could only see 100 feet before us. Thick fog had settled like an arena dome over our heads and all about us. We could see the dark shades of people beyond 100 feet, but it was like a blurred out black and white moving picture of them. The stone she found for me I skipped rather well. There was a surf breaking, so I had to aim the first skip between the breaking wave and the next one while still getting the stone to land flat enough so that it would actually skip. I was skipping stones to release dark energy. My daughter had been born that week, and I'd just found out yesterday, and I was prohibited from seeing her by my spouse. There was no sense then when I'd be able to see her. As of this writing 2 months later, I have still not met her. I see pictures and videos online that her mother posts. Like everyone else, I see these, and I press the love icon on each one. But no behind the scenes stories or news for me. No real comedy or drama or mystery. Really, it feels almost like nothing compared to what it could be. And here I am in this room that nearly killed my brother, facing the same circumstances, except that I am alone. My mother is out of the picture, residing soundly in her own oblivion 70 miles away. Here I am doing what I can to make my way through. I alter myself too. No heroin, of course, not for me, but there's beer, wine, and the occasional weed. There's music and poetry and day trips to the Cape on the weekends. There's managing my mother's affairs, carefully trying to navigate the landscape of caring for another person, with the paperwork, all the paperwork, feeling my way in the dark, getting it done task by task somehow. I've been in far worse houses where the evidence of suffering was greater. One house, there was a black mold over every square inch of the bathroom. It was a one-room apartment with bunk beds against every wall. Everyone was laying in their own bed, half dead. A few buildings over, a man let me in to view the place. He was in his living room playing video games. All over the hallway and in the living room, there were empty bottles of whiskey. And between the empty bottles were towers of stacked empty pizza boxes. There were hundreds of used pizza boxes stacked. Lining the hallway was a carpet of newspapers. The newspapers formed a bridge between the living room and the bathroom. Inside the bathroom, the toilet was an exploded shit mess. Unflushed, it looked like the man's job was to shit his brains out, and all his other habits just served that function. There was this time a superintendent opened the door to an apartment and screamed like a little girl. Everywhere the eye could see up to the knees was dirty laundry. There was no floor. There was no furniture. There was just an ocean of dirty laundry. There was a two-bedroom apartment with one tenant in the living room watching TV. The living room, kitchen, and his bedroom were spotless. But behind the door of the second bedroom was a mountain of 2-liter soda bottles filled to the brim with human piss. From floor to ceiling, the bottles were somehow stacked upon one another. There was the time the super, my client, and I walked through a man's apartment. He let us take pictures of every room, answered any and all questions. He seemed very nice. When my client asked him what was behind the door, he answered, "That is the closet." When my client asked him if he could look in the closet, the man answered, "No, my wife is in there." There was the woman who lived in her boyfriend's apartment. Her boyfriend was doing time in jail, and so she had the place to herself, except she also had to take care of her boyfriend's 16-foot anaconda, which stayed in its own bedroom in a floor-to-ceiling cage. She was supposed to feed it whole live chickens, which she did a few times, but she was deathly afraid of the snake. And one day, while she was trying to feed it a chicken, the snake struck out at her. She dropped the chicken, and with the door to the snake cage left open, she ran out of the apartment and never returned. There are, all sorts of atrocities sharing walls and living side by side with otherwise well-adjusted people. People who are oblivious to what plague exactly ails their neighbor, or that there even is a plague. There are people who are untouched by plague. There are people, maybe, who do not feel pain, who never got cut by circumstance or suffered a broken heart. These people have normal apartments that are well dusted and clean and smell good, where the toilet is white and you wouldn't mind to let a dog drink out of it, where the kitchen is in order but smells like good meals were made there, where the cupboard and fridge are stocked with healthy food, where the garbage is freshly changed, where the laundry is folded after being well laundered. People whose lives have not been shattered yet. I've been in their houses too. I had a friend in the business a decade ago. He'd gotten in trouble for stealing medicine from the medicine cabinet of a well-adjusted person and fallen asleep on his couch. This man was a mess when he lived in the city. When he lived out in the Midwest with his parents, he was fine. He was a tree farmer and rose with the sun and tended to his tree farm with dignity and grace. When he came to live in the city, he drank whiskey and mixed it with whatever pills he could get his hands on. He got arrested once for trying to get into a Target at 3 a.m. wearing nothing but his underwear. He died a few years back of a heart attack. He was in his mid-50s. I had a friend who was an attorney, but loved to drink and mix whiskey with pills. One day while he was home in New Jersey visiting family, he went out to the bar and mixed whiskey with Ambien. He was kicked out of the bar. He stole a bicycle and tried to go home. He broke into a single middle-aged woman's house by jumping through the front window. She was asleep upstairs, but she woke up when she heard the snoring. My friend had passed out on the couch, stripped naked, after fixing himself a bowl of pudding and trying to eat it with chopsticks. When the cops came, they shone a light in my friend's eye. He thought he was in his own home and they were intruders, so he got up and attacked the cops. There was still glass from the window sticking out of his face. He was arrested and was able to get out the next day on a $50,000 bail bond. He had been impersonating a well-adjusted person up until then.